All right, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our Qualcomm live event. We are super excited to have Mr. Corey Timmons here to talk about all the great things within Qualcomm and really what Qualcomm is about and how it fits into this greater world of devices and internet and bandwidth and all these great things that we talk about on a day-to-day basis. So, Corey, I would love to, hand the baton over to you if you'd love to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role within the company at Qualcomm.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So hi, everybody. My name is Corey Timmons. I am the person in charge of global training for the channel for Qualcomm. And when I say that, think of yourselves as, retail sales professionals, people who work in operators, but globally. And really my job is to help boil all this stuff that we do down into information that you can actually use in the aisle talking one-on-one with a customer. That's really what it's all about, is how can you help your customer better understand what's inside their device and which features and benefits are right for them. And so anything we can do to help you understand what's inside, is what we're all about.
Awesome. Yeah, and it seems definitely from a retail pro's perspective, it's always nice to know. We always talk about experiences when having these conversations with customers, and it becomes so much less about what is the device as a physical device, but more so what does it do? What are the lifestyle changes that it expands into and changes within their day-to-day life? So if you could, it sounds pretty exciting for all the things that you guys are working on. So can you tell us a little bit more about your role in the company and where you kind of fit into the greater story there?
Yeah, so Qualcomm, for those of you who don't know who Qualcomm is, a lot of you may know Snapdragon. You may know the name Snapdragon, especially if you've come from a mobile device background or smartphone.
Sure.
So that might be something that you're used to, but we're really all about what our name really comes from quality communications. When we started about 35 years ago, we just had our 35th anniversary last week. And we started really helping to develop a lot of global positioning type stuff and satellite tracking type of things. But really, if you think about wireless communication, that's what we're all about. So 2G, 3G, 4G, 4G LTE, 5G, Bluetooth, a lot of these types of things, and not all that stuff is the same. So, when we get into retail, and I worked retail for years, and, you can very easily walk up and you just look at a fact tag and you just look at something like, how many cores does it have? How many megapixels does it have? And so we can fall into that trap as retail sales professionals of only looking at specs and not really understanding what does that mean, right? How do you take that and actually inform what you know, because your customers are asking you questions because you need to know more than them. And
Right.
It's up to us to really help you understand what all that means and how that's a value for them. And so that's who we are at Qualcomm. Is you can't go into retail and buy a Qualcomm device, but you can definitely buy a Surface Pro X, which is powered by a chip that's developed by Qualcomm, or you can, purchase a mobile phone, a smartphone that's powered by that, or Bluetooth speakers that are powered by a lot of our technologies. So, it's really about how do we help you understand, and not just you, but even that OEM, right? What is it that they bought, and how do they talk about some of the features and benefits that have happened there?
That's awesome. And one thing that I took away from when I was kind of looking up a little bit into Qualcomm and what they do, I started realizing the differences between saying that something is a chip or a system on a chip.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but the understanding there is that a chip could be a CPU or a GPU. But what makes the system on a chip is the wide variety of things that you're able to put into that, whether it's your Wi-Fi, the modem, all the processors. I believe some of you have the power. A way to sustain the power a little bit better and more efficiently. So there's a lot of really cool aspects of what a system on a chip is. Do you mind going into a little bit of Qualcomm side of that?
Yeah. So really, a system on a chip, the reason we have that architecture is if you think about, for those of you who are watching and are used to receiving, CPU training or what they think of processor training for, the traditional Wintel type of solution, right? Windows on an Intel platform, an AMD platform, is that I was trained on this for years, which is that it's really a CPU. And that when you think of the chip, you're thinking of the CPU. So how many cores does it have? What clock speed is it, right? And how do we get that faster? Can we go faster than 5 gigahertz, right? Can we get faster than this? Or how do I overclock it? Well, that's really in a world where you're plugged into the wall. So when you're plugged into the wall, like a gaming rig or a gaming laptop, or even just your traditional work laptop, you're really in a world where you're sucking power out of the wall. And so power efficiency, you're not really governed by that. In fact, you're putting bigger power supplies into your desktops, right? You're putting 100, 120, anything you can to drive dual graphics cards. You're overclocking, you're liquid cooling, you're pushing air through it. If you're going to do air through, you have to have all this cooling stuff. It's got LEDs all over it, right? You're doing all these things. I have a gaming rig like that.
Yeah. So
that's fantastic. But that is not a world where, you're dealing with this. So when you have a phone, I don't want to have this plugged in, right? When you plug your phone in, it doesn't get faster. If you were talking on the phone, you don't want fans kicking in. You can't have it get hot because you're holding it, right? The average temperature of a CPU, if you are not liquid cooling it, is, you could be pushing, 90 Celsius, 100 Celsius before it overclocks and turns down. You would fry your hand. So we have to consider a world where we are focused 100% on the battery. And because of that, because we can only take so much battery with us, we cannot just focus on the CPU. We have to take the whole motherboard and shrink it down to something that fits between your thumb and forefinger. And so we have to think, so when you're talking about, like, how do I compare a Snapdragon chip versus like an Intel chip or an AMD chip, is that it's just a different architecture. We're really building the entire board onto a chip so that we can sip at power. And we have to give you different engines. So if you look at like the Android operating system, for example, which is running on a system on a chip architecture primarily. So when you're looking at something like that, it's designed to run that way, to use different parts of the chips to be more power efficient rather than just the CPU.
Yeah, that definitely, I know a lot of times in our conversations that's come up, is that mobile aspect, is that aspect of picking up and leaving from your home and making sure that you're staying connected. And it seems that in a COVID world, that's even more valued, is that ability to connect while not physically being able to be next to each other. And obviously most of us like to do that, whether it's FaceTime, Google Hangouts, Skype, through our phones. I'll walk down the street and see people walking their dogs and they're on voice chats with family members. So it's really insane to think about all the different hardware and processes that go into making that kind of experience, but exist in a tiny little device like this.
Right. And think about it, that's the reason that's in your pocket all the time, is because it's connected. Mm-hmm. If that wasn't connected, Josh, if you didn't have your phone in your pocket all the time, you wouldn't have it in there if you weren't connected. If you couldn't take a picture and post it to Instagram immediately, you wouldn't be taking pictures with it. Right. When we had to take pictures and develop film, and there's times when we develop film, back, I'm older than you. But when you had to develop film, sometimes you would take, you would wait and you would take 3-4 rolls in at a time and have it developed, and you get pictures back. You're like, oh, I forgot we even took those pictures, right? You didn't even get them. People now have all of their pictures just sitting in the cloud, and they can access them and they can post them, right? And so even when there was that time when kind of you had these digital cameras and you had your phone, when the phone wasn't quite that good, but the digital camera, you take a picture and you had to go home, you had to plug it in and load it to your computer and then post it. And it was just it just didn't work because it was counterintuitive. It took too long. Mm-hmm. And so really it's the connectivity of these devices that really drives why we want them to be better cameras, why we want them to have better screens, faster refresh rates, being able to game on them, doing all those types of things, is because it's already in my pocket anyway. I don't want to carry 2 devices, right? I don't want to carry 3 devices. I don't want to carry those. I want this to do everything if I can. But at the same time, these are really, really good for consumption. Tablets and phones in general are really good for consumption, reading mail, checking Twitter, doing those types of things. They're not fantastic at content creation. Right. And what I mean by that is, like, I can type a text, but I don't want to type a long email on this. Mm-hmm. Right. I can, a lot of people don't use them to make a phone call anymore. Right. They're just literally just don't call me, just text me. But this is not great. I can shoot video on it, but I probably don't want to edit video on it. Sure. I want to do that on a PC. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at doing things either from a productivity standpoint for work, or for personal, or for web design, or for whatever, we want to do that on something where we have a lot more input and a flexibility in the environment, which is what Windows and Microsoft 365 really gives us.
That's amazing. I mean, and just to reiterate that point of you're looking at it from a standpoint of what is the value of taking a device with you on the go, or taking it, let's say, out of the wall, as you said before. And it's not so much, we see so much when it comes to devices and the advancement of technology that devices or solutions are often developed for problems that don't exist, or just a luxury item, if you will. But it seems like with Qualcomm, when it comes to what you guys are trying to do with the mobile environment, connecting devices, is what is it that we already know people want to do on the go or in the Starbucks, whatever it may be, and how do we come to them and meet them at that solution, rather than trying to develop some problem that exists just so that Qualcomm can develop, a service, a product, or a system on a chip. You guys are literally taking the real life application and making sure that you're providing a solution to those.
Right. I mean, we all come, right. So we're an engineering company, and we all, Qualcomm's been solving for this problem for 35 years.
Right.
And like I said, because we come from mobile, because that's where we were born and bred, we have a lot of expertise on how you can get more power per watt, how performance per watt, how you can get all of those types of things, because we're so governed by the battery. If you go look at CNET or any of these types of places, do a review on any phone, pick any phone. If the phone doesn't last all day, they ding it. If it gets hot and overheats, they ding it, right? If it has a slow connectivity, they ding it. And yet, if you look at how they benchmark or how they review a laptop, it's not the same.
Right.
It's not the same. They run benchmarks on, they plug it in, they run benchmarks on it, and they do what they've done for 20, 30 years on how they review a laptop or a desktop, and they don't think they're two totally different workflows for them. Right. And what we saw was really a gap between how people want to use devices and why people were starting to move to more tablets, because they said, I want the ability to take it with me. I want it to be thin. I don't want to carry something heavy. But they were losing Windows. They were losing the productivity. They were losing what they needed in order to be compatible. They were losing all of that. And Microsoft was really also losing those customers to other types of solutions, right? And so, because the architectures that exist were not battery efficient. And even the most battery efficient of them are not battery efficient. And so Windows had to do things like, go into standby as much as possible, right? Shut the laptop down as much as possible, because it was making up for an inefficient engine. And so while those engines are great for doing some things, right, they're not great for all-day experience, multi-day experience. They're not great for being constantly connected. If you take a Core i5 type of solution, and you take a Core i5 type of solution and you try to run it connected all the time on battery, it will quickly drain on you, right?
Right.
So they're not really designed to be always connected. They're not really designed to be always on. And if you think about how we use Windows versus how you use a phone, that is, it's a very different experience.
Sure.
You boot up Windows, you log in, you go through security stuff, you connect, you join a hotspot, and then you download your email in Outlook. Yeah. And then you start doing stuff and sending it, and it does it send receive, and it does all of that, right? And then when I leave, I don't just close my laptop and put it in my backpack, because then it would overheat in my backpack, right? If I'm in high performance mode, or if I'm not, then it turns the screen off, it goes into a standby state, it's not connected. If someone's trying to get a hold of me, if I get a Skype call, if I get a Teams call, nothing rings, nothing happens. Yep. When I get to where I go, I have to then turn it back on. The battery's probably been draining the whole time. I then connect to some other Wi-Fi hotspot, buy a coffee, do whatever to do that. And then I reconnect, and I'm doing that. So that's not a connected experience. You would not accept that from your phone. You would, if this screen is off, but the phone is still on, right? It's instant on.
Yep.
So if I get a text message, it's going to text, right? If my wife calls, I better answer it.
Right.
She wouldn't accept that it was in my backpack and it was off. You don't power your phone off, right? And how often do we reboot our phones? Almost never. Mm-hmm. So if you think about how we use Windows, that's an experience. It's a legacy use experience for a lot of people coming up from this is when everything they've had. And so how do we bring a lot of this type of experience right? Instant on, always connected. The ability for me to use it for multiple days without charging it. The, you know, weeks of standby time. How do we bring that type of power and experience to Windows? And that's what these types of devices are. That's what the Surface Pro X is how do we begin to power that type of